Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast Lehr with me, your host Imperial Dane. The topic of the day is the KV8 flamethrower tank, armed with a considerable flamethrower. It's a nasty piece of work, which is also based on the KV chassis, meaning it's actually pretty tough.
Okay, that's the last one.
With your roll combined with its very effective flamethrower, which essentially can tear through an infantry squad faster than you can say, oh dear, or scheisse. If that's the direction you're sort of falling towards, makes this actually quite the anti-infantry weapon. And do not make any mistake, that flamethrower mounted on it is absolutely lethal. And I do mean lethal. Things to notice about it is it's a doctrinal unit, available of many doctrines, including the ever-popular shock rifle. It has access to the KV8, well, costs 360 manpower, 155 fuel, meaning it's in somewhat more expensive territory, but at the same time it's not super expensive, again, considering it's actually a heavy tank with reasonable amount of armor and actually quite a bit of health. That, for example, is something very much good to keep in mind while using the KV8, and for that matter, fighting against it. It is tough. It is very tough. In particular for things like packs or infantry, I mean, you know, most of the weapons will certainly have trouble, and in particular they will just risk getting roasted right away when fighting the KV8. Another thing to know about it is it does possess a second weapon which can switch over to. A 45mm gun. Effective against light vehicles. Not really much worth against more heavily armed vehicles, but at the same time, I mean, it can be useful and provide, you know, say, support for other anti-vehicle efforts when, say, dealing with a Panzer IV or a Stug. But overall, do not expect it to take a Panzer on head-on with a 45mm gun and win. That would be expecting a bit too much out of it. Much too, in fact, out of it. And as the Germans, generally when you see a KV8 and you only have infantry out, I mean, generally that is what your response ought to be, as you might be noticing here. Retreat. A Panzerfaust might not work, and in that case you'll just have wasted several seconds there both trying to sort of kill it. As you might be noticing here, it's just tearing through the infantry squad. It moves about as fast as they can treat. On this case, just blocks their path. Right here, as you might be noticing, is actually wiping out an infantry squad, and basically that means, now just pointing this out again more specifically, I mean, you can even lose a veteran-free infantry squad in the blink of an eye, simply again because the flamethrower is just that powerful. I mean, the KV8 really is an infantry annihilator, a one that can give most German players a bit of a fright once it first appears in pack 40s. I mean, you're going to need at least two, because otherwise it can quickly drive up to one and begin scorching it through, because the pack 40 actually has a chance of not penetrating that thick hole of the KV8, and even then it's going to take down several shots before it can even knock it out. And in that period of time, the KV8 will have burned through the pack 40 crew. So in general, you actually want some armor or telemounted something to sort of, you know, either ensure that there's nothing for it to burn, or you actually limit its mobility, giving your other, well, squishier and more, well, burnable units a chance of actually filling it with shells and rockets. Otherwise, it will drive through your base or your lines and just burn everything to a cinder. So that is very much something to keep in mind, and that's really something important to keep in mind as the German players. I mean, it is a surprisingly powerful and effective vehicle considering its cost. Oops. So again, something to keep in mind, something to be very much aware of. And again, it can bounce shots off. For example, Panzer IV has only a slightly over 50% chance of even penetrating its hull. So there's definitely a lot of problems there. Of course, the rear armor, though, is nicely open. But again, noting here, burning away. And also noting here, another thing about the KV8, it's actually pretty good at dealing with base structures. In fact, it's not uncommon for some more sinister and insidious players to actually sneak a KV8 into your opponent's base at a certain junction when everything else out in the field, and then basically burn it down in minutes without the opponent having time to react, because he can absolutely go through a base in that short amount of time. That flamethrower is insanely effective against it. Of course, at the same time, I mean, you know, it has a limitation. Again, it's not very good against other tanks. And that's, well, basically its main limitation. It really sucks against other tanks. And generally you want armor to deal with that one, or an awful lot of telemines and some other goodies. Otherwise, I mean, you are going to be in a lot of trouble when it comes to the KV8. Simply put, I'm afraid. Otherwise, I mean, you know, keeping that in mind, of course, you know, trying to be careful, utilize the flame for as much effect as possible, getting in the retreat path and such, you know, essentially gets you the most out of the KV8, but at the same time, I mean, again, it can do so much damage in a short amount of time.
Well done, comrades.
And again, note, lots of damage here happening in a very brief amount of time. Panzer IV here trying to deal with it. But of course, at the same time, you know, not invincible. So right here, of course, we see, you know, his propensity for doing damage to buildings, and at the same time know its one major weakness, which is other tanks. So there we go. KV8 went down, horribly so, but not before, you know, wiping out several veteran units and, you know, actually doing quite a bit of damage to his opponent's base. And of course, I mean, you want to be careful about doing a base wreck, because again, it's about noting, I mean, if it's spotted by enemy armor, it doesn't have much of a lifetime. On the other hand, again, if there's infantry, you know, you quickly burn it down. So again, I mean, rules of thumb, if you're the Germans, pray to the heavens and the fatherland that you have something actually stop it, and otherwise leg it. I mean, don't try to panzerfaust unless you're feeling extremely confident and get a shot off on the rear armor. Otherwise, you know, get the devil out of there, and otherwise hope you got some stun rounds and it'll target weak point on your pack, maybe, that might provide a bit of aid there. And if you have to fight it with packs, get more than one, because you generally want to shoot that down very, very fast. Very important, in fact, to keep that in mind. Also, you know, as to search, be careful you don't, you know, end up spamming it too much. I mean, again, depending on the commander, you could end up, you know, short-circuiting and, well, end up taking away resources from other units that could provide a bit more of a, you know, longer-term goal, in particular as your opponent then gets more armor, in which case, again, your KV8 suddenly become a lot less and less effective. I mean, it can happen for some players, you know, that they just feel, oh, great, I'll get more KV8s, I'll get more KV8s, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's all gone. But again, you know, it's otherwise actually a quite effective tank in when it comes to dealing with infantry, probably one of the more effective ones overall. So generally not a bad investment to get for the most part, unless of course your opponent has a ton of armor, in which case there are probably better things to acquire, or even then, you know, you might still try to punish your opponent's infantry and then leave the tanks afterwards to be dealt with by something else. So, you know, with that in mind, again, you know, rules for Germans: run, get telemines or get some armor to deal with it, or a lot of packs. Generally don't try to engage with the infantry, and, you know, I mean, really try to get out of there, particularly if you have veteran units. I mean, you don't want to lose this, and again, it can, in the blink of an eye, turn veteran free units into, well, roast pork, if you will. So that's really one of the more dangerous things about it. It really is the sort of thing that can take all the hard-earned veterans you have and turn it into nothing in the blink of an eye. And do it consistently, unlike, say, artillery. Otherwise, you know, again, as the Russians, you know, you want to take advantage of it, you want to sort of hit the infantry as well, you want to sort of try avoid it being immobilized, of course, because again, then all of a sudden it's a huge big target. So again, that's something to be aware of. Of course, that's something as the Germans you want to do with telemines, target weak point and whatnot. Sneak up, try to sort of get in the way of, say, retreating units as well, that could be great. And of course, you know, sneaking into your opponent's space, blowing it up or burning it down can also work out nicely. Again, for the 4 to 5 minute gun, you know, it's great for dealing with light vehicles, can be used to support against medium armor. But do remember, it is there. So, hopefully you've learned a bit from this short Propagandacast Lehr on this vicious tank forged in the very fires of hell, or somewhere out of Moscow, I'm not entirely sure. Hopefully you learned something from this. Hopefully you now have a stronger understanding of the KV8, or at least of getting out of its way if you're the Germans. If you do, why not subscribe, tell your friends, share it with everyone. If not, you know, well, I'm certainly sorry. Feel free to let me know what you might like to see in the comments, and of course try and sort of get to work on it. This is Imperial Dane saying cheers.